That should be Dave.
Muted Dave.
Muted Dave and Mackie on WZZR, broadcasting from Australia, the mythical land for Revolution Radio on revolution.radio, where it's more than just radio. So jump into the chat room if you can. This is show number, I don't even know anymore, 375, 570 and 300?
376.
And we got 70, oh my goodness, 376, 670 and 300. 670 and 300. We're going to talk about giants. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of stuff. It's really interesting stuff, actually. Now, it's on air, online, and on your smart device. So grab an app to listen anywhere or listen at home on a Grace tabletop digital radio. If you missed Solaris' show, shame on you. But if you did miss it, it only costs $5.95, I think, a month to access the Freedom Slips archives. And you can check out her shows, our shows, everybody's show on the archives. It's an all-access archive database. So once you have access to it, you can see, you can see and hear it all. So I think that's awesome. Only $5.95. Come on, seriously. I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land. That's the Daruk people, and for my esteemed co-host,
the Darkanyung.
Thank you. We like to pay our respects to elders past, present, and future. Just very quickly on the $5.95 subscription, this is listener-funded radio, and all the special effects are, the equipment is very expensive. The Echo machine costs thousands of dollars, right? So if you can spare $1 or $2 or $10 or $100 and support the station, that'd be great. It's completely listener-funded. There's no corporate sponsorship. That's why you hear the things you do. And we also are demonetized on YouTube, Dave and I. Just if that's your thing, you're looking for things that demonetized, we're it. They hit us, and actually, even before we were completely demonetized, a whole bunch of our shows were taken out of that monetization cycle because it talked about things like 10-12.
That's right.
And the Blockefellers, yeah, and the Black Shields, yeah, all those guys.
Yeah.
It happened. But look, if you can, it'd be great. And again, Solaris is awesome. She is here just before us. She's got a fairly significant, I want to say, internet presence. So go ahead and find her site or sites. She's a published author, and she has a documentary as well, video. That's right. So that's pretty cool. And she was gracious enough to be a guest on our show a couple of times, which was really fun. Radio.
Tonight, Mackie, she had Chip Tatum on talking about CIA.
Yes, Chip Tatum. Yeah, I saw that. In fact, I looked at his profile. He's a veteran everything. My goodness, it's really cool stuff. And he was part of I guess a special operations group within the CIA. So that's really awesome stuff. Yeah, no, look, and she always has great guests. She's well known within our circles. Can you say that? Our circles? Whatever that circle is. Even more poignant, talking about circles, of course. If you know Solaris and Dave and I, and our beliefs and what we think is what's what, everything is connected. But the circle is also, of course, a very powerful symbol representing the old religions, and the power that lies within the unbroken circle is immense. But look, this week in Australia, I can only speak for Australia, obviously, because we're here. We had another week of high 20s. Yeah, that's high. That's in Celsius. So it's summer temperature, like European summer temperature. That's what we had. European summer. Even today, I was outside, took my girls bike riding, and the sun was blazing down upon us. It wasn't horribly hot, but it was very, very pleasant. And this is, the next month, in five or 6 days, it's winter. In 5, Dave, climate change is a hoax.
Sure,
climate change doesn't exist.
So if you live anywhere else but Australia, you may believe that. But Mickey, did you know the long-term average temperature in the last 200 years for January is 26 degrees. That's the long-term average temperature, not the current one, but the one that used to be. And this has been 25 degrees and above in the last week. Like, this is what we're saying down here in Australia, the mythical land that doesn't exist. It's, if you're a conspiracy theorist, then Australia is just full of crisis actors, right? And we're
in Hawaii.
We're clearly all
I'm in Hawaii.
Oh, you're in Hawaii.
Montana.
In the bunker. I like that.
In Hawaii.
Like Twin Peaks.
That's it.
I don't know. I just made that up. Wrapped in plastic. Well, most of the ocean is wrapped in plastic. That's pretty good. I think we've done really well with that. Oh boy, what's been happening in your world this week, Mackie?
Oh look, a lot of things have been happening. It's actually quite crazy politically in Australia. We had just had the election, and in Australia, I think we spoke about this a bit last week. It was Labour versus Liberals. It's Conservative versus Liberal. Yeah, Liberal, not socialist. Oh, well, probably more socialist than you have it in the States. Certainly more socialist than your Democratic Party, but they lost. So there's the socialists lost, and we have another 4. Well, not really. Probably going to be another 2.5 or 3 years of Liberal to look forward to. Now, it's really a very divisive kind of decision that these parties have now made Australia into. It's very divisive in Australia, similar to the States. And we have one side which is wants to work on climate change and do things, but at the same time wants to punish all the people that worked hard to make a crust. So the taxes are high if you go Labour, and they want to do away with a whole bunch of retirement benefits for the people that actually saved up a few pennies. Whereas the Liberals, the Conservative Party, they don't believe in climate change. It's a hoax, which is largely because they're in the pocket of big coal.
True.
In Australia, coal is still a thing. It's actually worth gazillions.
It's because we have one of the world's largest resources of coal, and as soon as that becomes unfashionable, what else do we have?
We got uranium. Uranium?
Yeah. There you go. That's even better.
What have they done for us lately? The aqueduct? Yeah. But shut up.
Yeah.
So, look, if you haven't seen any Monty Python movies, you will be lost halfway through the show. I'm telling you. Go and learn yourself some Monty Python. No, but yeah, it is a very strange time here. So the Liberals are back in power with a fairly good majority as well. So that's interesting. Other things, though, Dave, that have happened during the week. You've posted a few of those. The Donald Trump and the China were going head to head, but now that has relaxed a little bit. Google wasn't going to update its latest Android.
In fact, they were going to ban Huawei entirely from their platform.
Yeah, that's no longer the case.
And then that's right. And right before Google backtracked on it, backpedaled, China announced, it's all right because we've got our own platform anyway. We've just been holding on to it because your one's sort of free. We can use that, but we made our own anyway. And then as soon as they said that, no, you can keep using our platform.
I know, right?
There must be something inherent in it which allows us to track them then.
Yeah, I actually met with Huawei this week. Oh no, what's Mackie doing meeting with Huawei? Well, we actually work with them, believe it or not. And I met with the country manager or general manager for Australia, Colin, nice guy. And yeah, so we work together, and it's just business, right? The funny thing is this, though, Dave, and this just came through in the news. Huawei faces a break with a key chip maker. Chinese company is dealt an insurmountable blow as chip designer says it must comply with U.S. trade ban, which is interesting because Huawei makes its own chips, right?
Yeah.
And if that there could be a significant setback for Huawei, but we'll see what happens. One thing that disturbed me a little bit this week, sort of hangover from last week, was the ruling of, the passing of into law of legislation that bans all abortions in Alabama except except where a woman's life is at risk. And there's no special provision for incest or rape either.
Mm-hmm.
And what they're hoping, of course, is that this will be challenged and taken to the Supreme Court. And with a majority of conservative Supreme Court judges now in residence, we may see an overturning of the Roe v. Wade, that landmark case that allowed or legalized abortions within the continental United States.
Well, there's something connected to that, Mackie, as well. And there was a felon who was convicted of rape, and the lady saw that, to term, and has been raising the child, and he's now been granted access to the child.
Yes.
That's going to be a thing, right? So that precedent, you're right, that precedent has turned it into a thing now, right? So if you're raped and you bring up the child because you couldn't get an abortion, then you're going to have to see the rapist again. I
mean, what do you say to that, Dave? I mean, I'm sorry, I don't even know what to say to that.
It's madness.
It is complete madness. So look, am I pro-life? Well, I'm generally pro-life because I think it's better than the alternative. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But by the same token, I saw this very beautiful. I think Willow might have posted it.
Yeah.
And it said, look, just because I'm pro-choice doesn't mean I'm pro-abortion. What it says or what it means is that I respect that you have the right to choose what happens to your body,
mm-hmm.
and it is no effing business of mine at all.
That's right.
So, which it isn't. It isn't. I mean, it's insane. We want to tell people what to do all the time, right? I mean, if nobody is I mean, whose business is it? If somebody, I mean, I'm going to draw the bow here. If someone is gay, okay, if someone is transgender, if someone is asexual, for that matter,
the corporation.
Of course it is, right? But I mean, if no longer, as long as no one is harmed, and I mean,
mm-hmm.
okay, you can argue, well, if you have an abortion, you're harming the fetus. That's true. I'm not making any excuses, but what I can't do is make the choice for a woman. I'm a man.
No.
I'm a man, and God forbid it happens, but I can't then tell a woman, you have to do this or that, because
mm-hmm.
I'm not that, right? And in fact, you say you claim moral authority. I wanted to say this some weeks ago. I will say it now, Dave. My flying spaghetti monster in the sky is better than yours.
Do you know what? I actually already knew that because mine's the macaroni, flying macaroni monster.
See, mine is a fusilli. You like silly, right? Fusilli,
Mine's made with glued together macaroni. The thing is that you got to be careful about the term abortion, and whether or not it's before 12 weeks is a consideration. And I think after then, when if it's got its own heartbeat, that's an issue. And
yes.
You probably should have. I'm just going to be as kind as I can. At some point, you might have made your mind up, right? And let's hope 12 weeks is sufficient. That's all I can say, because like I said, it's not my body. And if someone against my will did something that started growing something in my body, I think I should have a choice about it. But that's. I'm trying not to get into the religious component of it, because I think there's a renewal of some of the religious beliefs in the right to life, and and that's quite strong. So the next question that I've got is, what other times in history when people have lent back on faith again? What were the instigators where people lent back onto faith, where they'd maybe taken, like a baseball player might try to sneak base, and he's leaving the base but got his foot stretched out, then suddenly he might steal a few steps and look unnoticed. What was it recently about religious types and their beliefs where they've now been catapulted back or sprung back to their base? And is it because the world is changing so fast? I don't know. I'm trying to work that out.
Look, I mean, we've seen this with okay. So human nature is quite easily understood. It's hard to fathom, but it's easily understood. People are usually afraid of change. People are usually happiest as part of a group. So a group identity for us as people is very important. And in times of uncertainty, people look to a very strong voice. When times are ambiguous and you don't know what's going on in the world, it is no good having a leader that says, it could be okay to do this, but I'm not sure. Oh, let me ask someone here. That's not the leader you're looking for, right? That's the leader for good times. When it's tough, you want someone that is very harsh, very stern, and says, "Hey, look, this is the truth, and you follow me, and you're going to be okay." And all of a sudden, people go, "Oh, we're going to be okay. All right,
I didn't have to make a decision after all."
Bingo, right? And that's really the problem. Which brings me, sadly, to another thing I wanted to very quickly share with you, and that's the persistent state of chaos that is now, I guess, what you can call the British arena of politics. Theresa May has resigned. That might not mean anything to you, but she was the Prime Minister of Great Britain. She was the Prime Minister that didn't really want to leave the European Union without a deal for Great Britain. Now Boris Johnson is a forerunner.
Oh my goodness! Have you seen him? You know what he looks like, right? But for the listener, my goodness, if you've ever had a bad hair day, you woke up and your hair's all over the place, well, this guy considers hair just, I don't know, it's an option.
It's an option. He looks like what Donald Trump would look like with bad hair. Okay, so Donald Trump's hair is awesome if you compare it to Boris Johnson's. But that's beside the point. So Boris Johnson is a bit of a, I don't know, he's a flip-flopper, he's a leaf in the wind, he's looking to be Prime Minister, I get it, who isn't looking for the top job? But fundamentally, we could now be looking at Great Britain exiting the European Union without a deal, because he said, if I get into power, he said, we'll get out of the European Union, with or without a deal. And at this point, I can assure you that the European leaders, or the European Parliament and so forth, they've pretty much had it with Great Britain. Because they've given them one extension after another. The final extension is now until October 31st. Interesting, right? Solaris, what do you think about that date? But essentially, and I know, right? Well, All Hallows Eve. That's it. It's one of the high feasts. Be that as it may. In fact, you know what I found out the other day? I didn't realize this. Sorry, I'm jumping.
No, that's okay. What was it?
I was born on the same day as Harry Potter. Fictionally, of course. Harry Potter is born on that day, but I'm born on that day also. Not the same year.
Looks like we've got some audio.
The fourth,
just keep rolling.
And I was born. I keep rolling, my friend. No worries. Okay, look. But yeah, so it's really strange what's happening there. So we'll see what happens in the future in Europe. It could be a very interesting situation. Dave pushed something through to me the other day. It's an article from which was published May 21st, and it says sea levels may rise much faster than previously predicted, swamping coastal cities such as Shanghai. Study finds. And then the meat here is this. I'm going to share 3 paragraphs and I'm going to throw it to you, my friend, because this is something we've been talking about forever. Global sea levels could rise more than 2 meters. That's 6.6 feet. That's taller than I am. By the end of the century, if emissions continue unchecked, swamping major cities such as New York and Shanghai and displacing up to 187 million people. Yeah, the study, which was released Monday, says sea levels may rise much faster than previously estimated due to the accelerating melting of ice sheets in both Greenland and Antarctica. The international researchers predict that in the worst-case scenario under which global temperatures increase by 5 degrees Celsius, which is 9 degrees Fahrenheit, by 2100, sea levels could rise by more than 2 meters in the same period, doubling the upper limit that was outlined by the UN Climate Science Panel's last major report. Doubling. Now, I want to be the grim news bearer here, Dave. It's worse. It's actually worse. We don't even know how fast it's going to accelerate. And I can tell you right now, we're not going to make it to the middle of the century. We're not going to make it to 20, and we will see a rise of more than 2 meters. We will. It's going to happen. But what do you think, my friend?
Oh, yeah. All right. So all of the modelling that has taken us up until now, even that from the 70s, in each decade, as our modelling is getting better, we're still surprised. Even this year, we're surprised at the extent of the meltwater in Greenland and the loss of the thicker ice, because you're thinking you have to understand that in Antarctica there is at least 2 miles of ice, and that's something really that you should be taking notice of. And of course it's self-perpetuating, so once it hits a peak, there's no coming back from it. And it's the fresh water that's on land that's frozen that's causing this. Now the loss of the current glaciers, we've seen about 1/5 of a metre, about 20 centimetres, has already risen, or 200 mil, in the last 30 years. And it's only meant to be an inch a year, but it's going up so fast now, and it's accelerating, and you know what happens. You think to yourself, remember all of the parts of the land that you know of that's near sea level. So the Californian, most of the West Coast, the not just beachside, but the inhabitable lands around there, all the suburbs around LA. Certainly the Sydney Basin would fill up from the west with 2 meters. We'd lose our water treatment plants. We lose our power distribution. We lose transport. The airport for instance, goes underwater. Hang on, that's pretty much civilization, right? And we can't all suddenly live up in the Blue Mountains. We can't all suddenly go to high ground. We can't all suddenly just go somewhere else. There aren't places to go. In California, sure, we can all go over the hill and end up in Nevada. But it's going to be different. And who's going to have the money if the civilization has wound back? Imagine if there was no electricity. Thinking about the way that nuclear power plants cool themselves, they usually place them coastal because there's a nice fresh seawater they can get to use to cool their secondary air conditioning units, if you know what I'm saying. So there's a freshwater cycle that doesn't become irradiated, and they've got a contained cycle that is irradiated. And that fresh cycle coming in is the danger point, and that's what we saw at Fukushima. Those pumps were inundated, they were electric, they could no longer function, and that was what led to the meltdowns. 3 meltdowns. We're seeing the same thing, and we've, despite our best forecasts, it's probably going to be so underestimated, that we're going to be looking at some serious issues. And I've seen, Mackie, they're talking about this in the next 10 to 15 years. That's the long story of this article.
Yeah.
That it's not the 2100 thing that everyone's saying, oh, it's all the way out there, don't even worry about it. No, it's in fact, the way it's been accelerating out of control, it's going to be much sooner. And we're nowhere near, even, this is the thing, right? Even if tomorrow no one polluted anymore. So if tomorrow, magically, all the coal fire power generation was turned off, and every automobile on the planet, whippersnipper, even lawnmowers, all became electric, 25 years it would take before we would start to see a reduction in the CO2 levels. Just saying. So we should have already had done it. We should have already attacked all this. We should have done it before, but we haven't. And this is that, the canary in the mine is Sandy Island, for instance, which is already gone. It's no longer on the map. We did a show about that one.
It's not Sandy. It's Wet Island.
It's Water Island. It's Waterworld. Oh, please don't. So we also, and we've talked about this before, and I think it's a much greater problem than we've currently estimated, and we're currently even guessing. The guesstimations, I think, are closer, but maybe we'll still be surprised by those.
Yeah. Yeah. No, look, we are living in a time where, yes, we have accomplished a lot, scientifically and from an engineering point of view, but as a civilization we're still lacking, and I maintain this because we're all children, because we haven't got the moral depth and understanding or wisdom to use what we can do for everybody's benefit.
And for the long
and I had an interesting conversation around this, and 100%. Excuse me, no, absolutely. So I've got a frog in my throat, so that's what happens when you've got a. I have a frog. You have
I've got the flu.
Frog. We all have frogs, don't we? Yes. Dude, that's...
This week, Elon Musk launched 200 satellites at once, or something like that, and these are to provide internet. So they're micro. They're about a foot long, and he launched his. It was only on Friday or Saturday morning. It occurred. It was pretty cool. To the extent where they're distributed, I'm not quite sure yet. I'm still trying to find out where that's going to be, but there's going to be something like 2,000 of them eventually that will cover the globe. Now, I don't have a device that can currently transmit that far up into lower Earth orbit to be able to utilize that internet. So I suppose that's coming at some point in the future, where you can have a handheld device that transmits as far as up into low Earth orbit. Consider the power that's going to take to walk around.
I was gonna say, I mean, to boost your signal, either you have a massive power source with you, or we've got some kind of a wireless Tesla power transfer technology, right?
Yeah, just imagine a big backpack that's actually an aerial walking around. There wouldn't be many of us humans left if we had to transmit that kind of distance to get our internet. Because your mobile phone tower, wherever that is, they're now having to, with the new 5G, having to make many more of them.
Well, to be clear, you're right. I mean, 5G is going to kill all LTE networks, the 4G boosted networks, if you want to call them that. So there was 4G, then there was the 4G LTE, right? And there's also 4G LTE, but they're all going to be gone when 5G comes in, because apparently, first of all, it's going to use the same bandwidth, or part of the same bandwidth as the LTE networks.
HSDPA, right? Which is the high-speed data packet. Yep.
Correct. And it's going to be 10 or 20 times as fast, they say.
Yeah.
I'd be happy with just the freaking dial-up, because I'm telling you, my internet, it's not awesome. In Australia, we're behind Kazakhstan for internet speed. You know that? Kazakhstan has got faster internet than we do. Can't laugh at Borat anymore now.
Doesn't surprise me, to be honest. Mekki, I was having a discussion with someone just recently, and I was talking about that was it 52nd now on the world's internet, according to all of the...
No, 60-something, yeah.
60-something, right, okay. So I think we're 59th and we're 62nd. Whatever it happens to be. And that there are places on Earth, shouldn't say in Earth, on Earth, with internet, with fiber internet, that have a dirt floor at their house. It's not even, it's like third world, but with fiber internet, with gigabit internet, faster than what I've got. And that still astounds me that we're supposed to be a first world country, or whatever that's truly meant to mean, and yet the spend to be able to provide internet to people ended up not being the provider doing it. The government had to step in and do it. I know what the reasons they were, and that's fine. Just leaving those aside, so we don't get further demonetization and getting banned. It's very simple. Market forces don't create faster internet as they do, say, in the US. Because our internet that we're currently got at my house is nearly, I think, 10 years old. And the internet that's currently in the US on copper is, I think, 400 by 400 symmetrical speed, and we've got 100 by 40 on copper as this new thing, right? And it's their old technology. That's all it is. It's just the US's old tech. You've passed it down to us. Thank you. It's appreciated. And hopefully one day in about the next 10 years, we'll get the next one up. But we could have already had fiber. We could have had symmetrical gigabit.
Yep. It's always n minus
and something. It's
force
to the Planck length.
To the Planck length.
Minus 35.
It's just nuts. You know, I was thinking about, since you brought it up, too bad. I'm going to talk about it now. No, I was thinking, you know, our lives are. In fact, I was talking to an astrophysicist 2 weeks ago,
awesome.
who works for one of our clients, and we had lunch after a presentation that he gave to us. And he's a client actually. But he's by trade he's an astrophysicist. He's now part of the testing, or he's leading the testing regime for a government agency. You know, they're testing like chemicals and fertilizers and pet things, stuff. Anyway, point is, so we chatted, and it was really great. So you know, got any insights because he worked in. He's I could say he's one of the more premier scientists in Australia, probably, you know, one of the more senior ones. Anyway. So is there anything you can tell us, anything secret? Because he's been to Woomera, he's been everywhere, he's been here, there, you know, and he's seen it all. Nothing I can tell you, he said. But they said, well, what do you think is coming? What's coming our way? He says, the space elevator. The space elevator. Within 15 years, he reckons, we could have a space elevator. So we started talking about Lagrange points, you know, what kind of materials to use. And he was saying buckyballs. And I was saying, oh, really? So not nanotubes and all that stuff. But I'm telling you, a space elevator is just around the corner. On top of that, so after having had that enlightening conversation with this fellow, scientist,
yeah,
it was nice. I had another discussion with a friend, and we talked about the purpose of civilization. I asked, well, what's the purpose of our society, of civilization at large? And to be truthful, I found it very difficult to frame without being extremely negative. Because the purpose of our civilization seems to be consumption and enriching the 1,000 or so people that sit on top of the pyramid. That is the purpose of this civilization. If you look at anything that's happening on the planet, most countries, not all countries, it is only happening to enrich the few. Everything that is happening, anything you see today, anything that you partake in, anything that's presented to you, only exists to make the few at the top richer and the masses at the bottom poorer. That's it. Advances in technology. You know, we're talking about AI, we're talking about automation, we're talking about digitalization and all these wonderful things, right? And they are wonderful in and of themselves, but what are they being used for? They're being used, you know, for profit maximization purposes. That's it. So there are two drivers, right? There's greed, and there's war, and war usually feeds greed, right? But those are the two drivers. I mean, the only thing that ever pushes us forward is greed and conflict.
That's right.
Think of all the advances. Think of all the advances we've made during any of the wars that we go forward, or the Cold War. Even the Cold War, I consider a war because you know that drove the space program for the US and for the US. So what is the purpose then of our civilization? And I was very depressed the more I started thinking about it. Our civilization no longer has a higher purpose. Okay, it doesn't. You could say higher purpose is enlightenment or ascension, you know, or the betterment of everybody's condition, or making the planet a better place, or any of those wonderful things. That's a good goal for any civilization, right? We have none of those. Zero. The only thing that we do is fight and make the rich richer. That's all we do. And in fact, the fighting makes them richer too, which is great for them, right? But so people say, oh, you know, the new world order is coming. You know, they're going to take over, and you know, we're going to be slaves. That ship has sailed. Hello, it's like climate change. I mean, I'm sorry, but open your eyes. The climate is changing. I'm not saying I caused it or you caused it, but it's changing. Okay, so let's just say boom, and then you know, we're all going to live in a panopticon, the global slave caves. No. We're there.
We're already there.
It has, yeah. You are in it today. That's the thing. Go ahead.
Remember, Mackie, I'm clearing my throat because I'm just awfully weighed down here. I've got pseudoephedrine just to be able to stay sitting up in a chair. Mackie, the social credit system is now already a thing. We don't see it. You don't see it directly. It's not the thing that you're now positively engaged in your social media with. But there's the negative, social negative, that is now, we're now empowered by that. We've now been told you can't do this or that. We've now got websites you can't visit.
Yeah.
We are now being metered, is probably the best way I could put it. For all the positive things that we're doing and all the negative things we're doing, we're being punished for them. The positive things will yet to have a credit score, but in China I saw a report recently that said there was 10,000 or 20,000 people who weren't able to travel because they had negative social credit. Because they've already introduced their Facebook version of social credit, which, once it's in place and it's all happening, now I think it'll be looked at posthumously. So post from when they've done it, from when they go back as far as they can, and they'll see you. And you can remember, it's all about you. I post a lot of news stories and I like a lot of conversation. So I'm not pushing an agenda. I'm trying to inform my closest 1,500 people that I'm friends with on Facebook. That will be an undoing of mine, no doubt, at some point in the future. All the comments that I've written about everything, I try to be fair and balanced. I try not to be one-sided. I just try to make people aware, and that's all I'm doing. And I can say this now, but I know even the audio transcript from this is in YouTube, and that's owned by Google. That Google already know. Right? Not only do they already know, but to make a point, and I'll hand it to you, that everything that comes up in my feed, I'm sure, is a way to steer me. And I believe that one could possibly argue, if you were cornered at some point in the future socially by one of the companies, that you could argue that raise the question where they have to prove that it didn't exist, and that was that you'd already been steered there. In fact, that you're their creation. The person you are has been created because of their platform. And I think that's a really interesting place to go. Mackie, back to you in the studio.
Thank you, Dave in the field. You're right. I think you're right. And the funny thing is this, and I mentioned this last week, when Nighthawk tried to subtitle, or put hardcode subtitles into the show, he couldn't. So my accent and whatever I say is complete gibberish as far as the computer is concerned. So I'm okay. I just wanted to make everybody aware that I'm going to be all right, because the machines do not understand me. It's like that funny skit in Scotland. It's an elevator, right? 11.
Speak clearly and slowly.
Yes, two Scotsmen go into a voice-activated elevator, and the chaos that ensues is just priceless. Because, of course, a Scottish brogue is completely unintelligible.
It doesn't work for the AI. It's very funny, and then they get really upset. And it's please speak slowly and calmly. I'm calm.
I'm calm.
It only infuriates
go to the ground. But I believe even the Scots don't understand each other, and they get by completely with body language. Is what I think is happening. No, that's not true. I love the Scots. I love the accent of the Scots. And there's something like the Irish too. I love the Irish accent. I don't know why. It's just crazy. But but yeah. So look, it is strange, and I really struggle to see the purpose of our civilization beyond what it has become over the last, and it's not that long. This is really the funny thing, and I first noticed it really glaringly when I watched, of all things, Captain America, right? The movie. So he has he has all his adventures, and he's frozen. He's frozen in the ice for, I don't know, 50 years, I want to say, just after World War II, something like that, right? And then they find him, he's thawed out, and he comes back to life, and he walks around America. He looks at the TV shows, the internet, all that kind of thing, and he goes, "Oh my goodness," he says, what has happened to this country?
That's right.
Because the truth is this: America, even just after World War II, in the 1950s, still, it all changed in the 1960s, in my opinion. It was a very different place to what it is today. But the changes really started hitting America after the 1950s. Winning World War II, being involved as much, and then winning it was probably detrimental to America. And the warning that Eisenhower gave us, I'm sure he didn't give it quickly. He gave us the warning about the military industrial complex, and it happened. He was best placed to see it, and he was not just because he was the president, but because he had fought in World War II, was the commander-in-chief of the European theater of war. Right? It was him. He was in World War II fighting the invasion of Normandy and all.
What, Mekki, do you think was his strongest contact with the military-industrial complex, in which forced him to make that statement? You know what I'm saying, right? So he must have already had an encounter with them to be able to be so strong and outwards and forward about it.
Well, I think, I don't know if you have something else in mind, but I think it was to do with what happened in 1947, right?
That is
not just what happened in Roswell,
message.
But also
absolutely.
Okay. And the sightings in Washington. Do you remember this? I mean, everybody talks about Roswell, but people completely forget the sightings in Washington.
The Washington
itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and that was and then of course you have the Battle of L.A., which everybody thinks, and which is in fact our call sign in a way, I guess. Which everybody thinks is not a real thing because it's now been in the movie, right? So no, you're mistaken, Becky. That was in a movie. You see, it was in a movie. No, thanks for clearing it up for me. I feel so much better. So I think it is that, and I strongly believe that something happened, and I also believe that we're getting closer to disclosure. Not that it matters anymore, but there's a TV show that came out recently, Project Blue, and I started watching it, and I was amazed that anybody would have the chutzpah to actually go where they're going with this.
Yeah.
I mean,
X-Files dropped off, Mekki, and it has. Maybe they want to use this message.
All I can say is, if you watch Project Blue Book, and there's a lot of quite famous actors in it, and it's extremely well done. I urge you to watch it. Dave, I don't know if you had a chance to have a look at it yet.
Is it on Netflix?
The first I gave it to you.
Is it on Netflix?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, great.
Absolutely. I think it is. I think it's Netflix. Yeah, but So because the subject matter, I mean, they talk about the weather balloon and what happened to they talk about what happened to the pilots and how some of the pilots were treated with electroshock to the point where they lost their marbles, right? And they were decided by these generals in this dark lit room that is reminiscent of Dr. Strangelove, where they have their get-together. So something happened to the States. We no longer are on track as a civilization. If you look at all the great thinkers, men, women alike, straight or gay, it doesn't really matter. All these great thinkers, they were all driving humanity forward. And you can each age had a few of them, and usually they were defamed. And not many of them achieved fame in their lifetime or even recognition. Usually after they died. But eventually, they were recognized and humanity moved forward. I don't see them, Dave, today. I don't
either.
A single one. You're right. Yeah.
One of the things that I think is so powerful is that where no leader right now is aiming for peace, no leader is aiming to fix things. They're not trying, and they could be shown as shining gods of mortality, to use a topic from what we're going to talk about, but they're not. They've chosen not to go down that path, and they're choosing war. They're choosing not just that, but aggressive behavior. They're not trying to negotiate with anyone. They're just doing their own thing. It becomes an oligarchy, and there's rules for them and not for us. You know what I'm saying? So it's like they're splitting that whole section off, and it's now its own thing, and they don't care. And remember that the Mayans, right, talked about the dark rift, and this is part of their cycle. And I'm still under the belief that this is the warring side of, like the Coriolis effect affects the motion of objects. Maybe this is dipping our solar system's gone down through the galactic plane. This is the aggravated side, and the happy side's the other side. Because there's not a positive way forward.
No. It reminds me of the Underverse. If you watched Riddick, it's really interesting. They talk about the Underverse, and the necromancers are trying to get to the Underverse. And maybe we are going through a negative. And I know it sounds crazy, right? But we only think it's crazy because we've been indoctrinated to think a certain way. Mm-hmm. Okay, we are still driven. Emotions are a real thing. The paranormal is a real thing. I know it's scary to think about it. I know people are uncomfortable because they've been wired differently now, and that God is dead and all that, right? You gotta pull yourself out by your bootstraps and stop thinking like that, because we're not just a bag of flesh and bones and some liquid. Right, there's a fundamental spark or essence within us that makes us who we are. Any living creature, any living system, any living creature. There are two things in this universe. Two things: the things that are alive on whatever level and whichever way, and the things that are not alive. Right? That's it. That's the fundamental difference between the two things or the two modes of existence: either alive or not. And alive, for me, is a very stretchy term. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I don't doubt that there's silicon life out there potentially. Again,
silicon
life
based, not carbon. That's right.
Yeah, and we already know that copper can be used as an oxygen carrying agent within the blood, like octopus and lobster and so forth. Yeah, blue blood. Yeah. I mean, who are we to determine what life is anyway? But that's beside the point. The point I'm making here is it's life. Something, there's a spark. Either something is dead and inanimate, right? Those two. I mean, something can be inanimate and alive. Oh, sorry, this is a borderline thing. But the point here is, right, there's an animus, a spirit that pervades most things. And if you're in the East, and even the old Earth religions saw this, everything has a spirit. There's a living force in everything. Sometimes it manifests itself as well. In Japan, they've got these little shrines that look like houses, and they're houses for little spirits. They believe. And watch. There's a great movie, Spirited Away. You could argue it's a children's story. It's not really. It came out in 2001 or 2000. Miyazaki, I think, and one of his masterworks. If you aren't familiar with the concept of the Asian spirit world, watch it. It gives you a crash course. But this is the thing, though. We've lost our spiritual side. We've lost any future ambition to do something amazing. I mean, the Roman Empire saw itself as the light of the world. The road builders, the engineers, horrible people killing millions in their wake, but they had a purpose. They wanted to bring civilization to the darkest corner of the world, right? And they, well, you can argue that that they didn't, but the point is that there was a purpose driving that civilization. Other civilizations before them and since have had that. We do not. I thought maybe space exploration, Dave. Maybe space.
Maybe that would
for
do it,
us,
yeah.
right? But it isn't. It isn't. The only people that are pursuing space in a serious fashion are private enterprises, right? And some nations are now coming to the party, like the Chinese and Indians are trying as well. But for 50 years, nothing has moved in that. Nothing. We went to the moon, so they say. I'm sure we have been to the moon. I'm still dubious as to whether we went when they say we went, but that's beside the point. But then, for 50 years, radio silence, man. So this was not a driving force. I mean, I don't understand what has happened to as a people. Look at us. Oh, no, reality TV, my hamburger meal that I can order with menu log so I don't have to leave my house ever. Thank you. There's now a show called My 300-Pound Life. I've never watched it, but that's what it's called. My 300-Pound...
There's the music. Yeah.
Don't go away. Donate if you can.
Donate if you can. Take the time to donate. It's only a very short break. We'll see you on the other side at the top of the hour. I'm gonna guess that the music is finished. Where am I? Yeah, you're back with David Mackey's Shiny Side Out on freedomslips.com, the number one listener-supported talk radio on the net. So push the donate button or subscribe to the archives for about $5 a month. Not 55, just $5 a month. You get access to all of the host shows. I'd like to say hello to all of the new listeners we have, so we're glad you are on board. If you like, follow, subscribe, or whatever you happen to do if one of our show's social platforms, then we hope to make the journey an easy one for you. This is show number 376. They're weekly shows. It's 8 years plus, or in the 8th year, anyway, on Freedom Slips. And we thank very much the efforts of Nighthawk and his platform and this station, Revolution Radio, for the ability to be able to get our message out, to speak with you, to be invited, and most importantly, invited into your lives, because that's what radio does. You invite the person to better speak to you, and we really do appreciate that. Hang tight. Some of the topics we do talk about are right on the edge, or maybe even right into and firmly planted within the tinfoil hat zone, which is how we're named. Shiny Side Out is the correct way of folding your tinfoil hat. So as Meki and I like to say, and I know Meki's back on board with me, and that is to turn off your personal reality inverters, keep your hands inside the vehicle at all times, and there's no flash photography. So, Meki, one thing I sent you a message just before we wound up the first hour, and that is I'd like to mention Stanton Friedman just for a minute, and with the greatest respect, one of the best guests we've had. I think I only asked him one question, and there was the first hour gone, and I introduced us back on air again, and there was the second hour gone. And we just wish we had more time with him. But sadly, Stanton Friedman has passed. He takes with him all of the knowledge that he had, and with all of the levels of security that he was able to have and was assigned to him in all of the roles that he played in the military complex. While we talk about it, there's things happen and inventions happen, and it's a cauldron of new inventions that just kept getting plucked from it. So it might take a while, but they'll trickle down to us. For instance, the mobile phone CPU that you've got in your hand these days is greater than the nose cone of the F-16. and that's about it's roughly equivalent. But it's greater than now because we've packed more stuff into it. But in those days, when the F-16 was the thing, it had, a quad-core processor in it. Just saying. So back in the 80s, these processors existed. Now they use a lot less power, but they're still the same thing. So they were invented back then. So welcome back to Shiny Side Out, everyone. This, Mackie, do you have anything else to add?
No. That's it.
All right.
Knee deep in the Giants, my friend. Knee deep into the Giants.
To the Giants, yes.
To the Giants!
Knee deep to the Giants. That's actually funny. You should say that. Because that's where we would go, up to their knee. We've been talking about Giants as part 9.
My goodness. Yeah, that's about right. Now, today we're going to start off scientifically, human growth hormone, melatonin, and the pineal gland, right? Because I honestly believe that we're missing a whole section of our development, several sections potentially, right? Because we just died too young. So what does all of this have to do with anything, though, right? So the pineal gland is the least known of all the endocrine glands. The pineal isn't actually a gland. It's a neuroendocrine transducer, meaning it converts incoming nerve impulses into outgoing hormones. Yeah, it's like an exchange. Learn how the pineal gland behaves, the hormones it produces, and the foods that benefit it. Dave?
Human growth hormone, melatonin, and the pineal gland. The pineal gland, no larger than a grain of wheat, believe it or not, it's not very big, is the most mysterious endocrine gland of all. In 1628, the famous French philosopher Descartes called the pineal gland the seat of the soul. I think he was very accurate. Because of its inaccessible location deep within the center of our skulls, and attached by a stalk to the posterior wall of the third ventricle of the brain, the pineal gland hasn't been studied as exhaustively as other glands. The gland will sometimes shrink and then fill up with specific types of mineral salts that are referred to as brain sand. The condition has been traced directly to poor nutrition. When the condition exists in the pineal gland, thinking and sexual processes are affected. The pineal gland will respond quickly to proper nutrition even after being starved, and degeneration has begun. The pineal gland contains more lecithin than any other body part. In fact, lecithin is something my mother used to consume in great quantities. The pineal gland isn't an actual gland. It's a neuroendocrine transducer, as Mackie, my esteemed co-host, mentioned in the top of this, meaning it converts incoming nerve impulses into outgoing hormones. Most glands are triggered by changes in the body or hormones secreted by other glands. The pineal gland releases hormones in response to bioelectrical messages from the outside environment received through the eyes. There's something very important for you. The optic nerve sends information to the visual portion of the brain through nerve fibers. The impulses from the brain are carried to the superior cervical ganglia, a cluster of nerve cells, in other words, in the upper part of the neck by smaller nerve fibers. From there, the autonomic nervous system relays information to the pineal. I'll read this next one, then you can go on. In low light or darkness, the pineal gland secretes the hormone melatonin. Melatonin has been connected to many body functions. If one references back to medical information written before the early 90s, they may find no information on melatonin. Even in medical dictionaries, excesses of melatonin have been connected with alcoholism. Wow. Aging accelerates calcification of the pineal gland and calcification is connected with higher cancer rates. People who eat less sugar, less highly processed foods, and spend more time outdoors exhibit a lower incidence of calcification. Wait, I'm just going to focus on this sentence, Meki. People who eat less sugar, less highly processed foods, and spend more time outdoors, that's actually no one in these days, right?
Well, you see, this is very interesting, and you're 100% correct. Because I believe our lifestyle, this is going back to the purpose of civilization, our lifestyle is that deliberately, maybe not forced upon us is probably the wrong word, but certainly we've been guided to live the way that we do these days, right? And with one of the side effects, or maybe one of the main effects for the people in power, of course, being the calcification of the pineal gland. Because again, the pineal gland, in my estimation, is probably the single most important organ in our body, connecting us to the actual reality, I think. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Dave, you're right. It's everything. Everything is connected. Everything that we have been led to believe, everything that we think is good and right, and the way we like to live is exactly not that. It's exactly wrong. And the funny thing is this, right? I mean, you look, go back 50 years, 100 years. That's how people lived, right? For the most part, for the most part.
And Meki, we were, I have to say, we were probably kinder to each other. I think we lived a proper life. We had better memory. And you can name, there's a whole bunch of things. Like, we didn't have the tech, but we did the things that it made us human with each other.
See the tech is a crutch and an augmentation these days for us. You no longer have to remember things. You can just Google them. I mean, you don't even have to read books. Just read your screen, and you only read that whatever it is that bit of information that you want. Forget reading the whole book, right? Or getting it.
So you lose context as well.
You certainly do. Exactly. And I know. I mean, I look at my grandfather, who was born in 1901, and he was a very different kind of human being to even me. Very, very well read, very educated. He knew a lot of stuff because he had studied it. He spoke fluent Latin and ancient Greek and all that wonderful stuff. I think he had French as well. Anyway, but the point is, in my opinion, a different breed of person, and I think the environment as well as the way we've been led to live our lives has a lot to do with our deficiencies. We think we're very smart, but you know what? I think our lives are very poor approximations of what they could be. Now, melatonin production actually increases after dark. We've spoken about this many times in the past. Melatonin, very, very important. So it's important, to actually sleep and be in the dark. Turn all the lights off in your bedroom. In the morning, when sunlight hits the retina, it's part of your eye, production of the hormone slows. Light meals in the evening help improve sleep and maximize melatonin's anti-aging effects. Keeping a regular schedule and eating at set times increases hormone production. No, I haven't. Not yet, but I will. If we exercise or participate in any strenuous activity at night, we delay melatonin output. Stimulants and caffeine at any time of the day, but especially at night, slow or stop melatonin production altogether. Human growth hormone, HGH, and dihydroepiandrosterone, DHEA, and melatonin are all free radical scavenging, antioxidant, and anti-aging hormones. HGH, DHEA, and melatonin. Melatonin may be the most efficient of the free radical scavengers, especially for anti-aging, since it has the ability to permeate any cell in any part of the body. Within the cells, melatonin provides protection for the nucleus, the central structure containing the DNA. Protection of the central structure allows a damaged cell to repair itself. If a cell can't repair itself, it can mutate and turn into a cancer cell. The enzyme glutathione is stimulated by melatonin. Now, glutathione is a tripeptide containing the amino acids glutamic acid, cysteine, and glycine. Glutathione functions in several oxidation-reducing capabilities, so antioxidization, meaning it's an antioxidant. Research during the 30s and 40s showed it to be necessary for delivery of calcium to the brain cells. Research studies on 44 mentally retarded children using supplemental glutamic acid raised their test scores from an average of 69 to 87, almost normal. One of the test subjects, a 17-year-old boy, scored 107, which is average normal, on his first test, and after 6 months of treatment with glutamic acid scored 120. Superior intelligence, just below genius. Do you remember when we talked last week about how food and so forth can actually determine how we develop?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and we talked about bees and ants and how they do that. I still stand by it, and clearly, if you get the right stuff into your body, yeah, if you don't suffer from deficiencies, even if you've been genetically programmed to show these deficiencies, there's still hope for you. Organs and other body parts take their share of glutamic acid before the brain receives any. A nutritionally deficient diet has low or non-existent amounts of this necessary amino acid. When added to the diets of hyperactive children and others with behavioral problems, glutamic acid was able to obtain the same calming effects as the chemicals so often prescribed, and without side effects. Give me my Ritalin. I need Ritalin. Glutathione has shown to be highly beneficial in removing lead from the body. Lack of glutathione contributes to chronic fatigue. Glutamic acid can be found in almost all protein-rich foods, natural cheddar cheese, not cheese substitutes, or highly refined and processed cheese. So no cheese in a tube, please. Eggs, lean meats, peanuts, whole grains, soybeans, legumes, peas, and beans. Balance out your mental powers, get some sleep, and slow the aging processes by naturally caring for your pineal gland. Now, all these hormones, human growth hormone and others, as we can see yet again here, they have anti-aging properties. We're being steered away from them. Our diets are being robbed of them. We are. It is astounding, Dave. I mean, whenever we try to raise our head above the ground, we get slammed down, right? with bad food and bad TV and bad lifestyle choices. But so easy. It's so easy to make those bad choices these days, right? And there's a purpose behind all of this. There's a purpose. There's definitely an agenda that's being followed. You know, call it Agenda 21. I don't care what you call this agenda, but it's an agenda. And we have got to wake up, and we have to stand and do something else. We have to do something else, right? I mean, look at the people. Just look at the people, man. Look at the people around you. Do they look like zombies to you? Just daydreaming, sleepwalking, you know? Like sitting in the train carriage, on the bus, in the car next to you, whatever it might be?
I swear, a UFO could fly in peak hour traffic and no one would see it. They could, you know, people, they look down now. They don't look anywhere else.
Yeah, I agree.
Zombies. Imagine them when they're 80. They all have like these massive humps.
They're not going to make it to 80. You know why? Because the thing is this: Alzheimer's and all the degenerative brain diseases. We're gonna see a lot more of that because people are using their brains less.
35.
Yeah.
When their iPhone starts flashing and tells them they've got to jump into the pit.
Nice. That's shocking, isn't it?
It's time to jump into the pit. You know what a movie I'm talking about.
Oh, no, I do.
That was Logan's Run, wasn't it?
It was 100% Logan's Run. At the age of 30.
Yeah.
No, it's awesome. We ascend and go, woo. Then they get blown up in the anti-gravity field.
we're all beautiful people. No one's old here.
Ooh.
Now, you know, it's sad, but I think it's true. I think that this civilization that we're currently living in, where we've allowed, and I think there's a science to this. We're looking at we've reverse engineered what's occurring now, and with our health and our IQ and with our attention spans, with our the medical conditions that are seemingly worsening every year, especially the diagnosis of ADHD, they're probably all diet driven. But when you read through this, it seems ever convincingly that it is going in that direction. And is it science? Were we scienced into this, or were we intentionally driven down this path? Because you can only imagine there would be some group of people that, look, how dumb can we get them? Oh, if we pre-chew the meat, and I'm not saying any brands, and it's near food. What do you mean near food? Well, nothing will grow on it. It's not actual food. Well, can people eat it? Yeah, you can eat it. I wouldn't, though. And Krusty the Clown, I almost swallowed some of the sauce. I think that if it was at all possible that someone could do it, they would have done it. And maybe they have done it, and we're living that existence. Like, to be honest, why would you buy something like, I liked it was but I think I saw this the other day. It was a banana wrapped in plastic.
Yeah.
What
Oh
on
my God.
earth was going through someone's head? So, Mickey, if you and I were given the task of generating 30 different kinds of fruit, we wouldn't make it so the fruit was on the outside. We'd make it in a casing that could survive transport, right?
Yes, absolutely.
It's just insane. Anyway,
boggles the mind.
It does.
The next bit of our show is from the other side of the fence, like people that don't believe at all that giants exist. Mark Twain was one of them. Interestingly enough, I put it here to give you a counterpoint to the things we've been telling you. You have to be presented with all sides of an argument. So the next bit is called When Giants Roamed the Earth. It was written by Mark Rose, and it's coming from archaeology.com. So this is the official position, if you will, on giants. And of course, zooming in on the Cardiff giant, which we now know was in fact a hoax. But it's taken that, certainly to then extend to all other giant finds as well. It's like if you fake one UFO landing, clearly all other UFO landings are fake as well, kind of argument. Right? If it was a weather balloon, they can shoot them all. Yeah, literally, right? If it was a weather balloon once, it was a weather balloon always.
Mickey, why don't I just say what I typed in? The weather balloon thing was funny. That was the instantaneous reaction to 1947 Roswell. The second one was a high altitude balloon which was used to listen for nuclear explosions all around the world. The third one was they're just crash test dummies that they used from a high altitude to see something, whatever. And now the argument is that Russia had taken autistic children and medically altered them by surgery to look like aliens, stuffed them into a UFO kind of poddy thing, and flew over New Mexico and jettisoned that pod. So the US would believe that they were aliens. Now, that's clearly the most preposterous of all of the excuses given for the Roswell crash, but, it's the next one, and one of them's going to stick eventually, Mackie, when we've given up caring about it, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I had to put that out there because that was this week that I saw this one, and there's a whole book out and about it. So don't shoot the messenger. All right, Mark Twain parodied petrification hoaxes with his account of the discovery of one, which some newspapers took as a true story. He also aimed his humour at the Cardiff giant, by the way. Gideon Emmons and Henry Nichols are nowhere listed among the heroes among American archaeology, but the discovery they made in October 16, 1869 captured the nation's imagination. Digging a well on the farm of William Stubb, it's inverted commas, that's obviously his nickname, Newell, in the hamlet of Cardiff, New York, they hit stone 3 feet down, clearing the soil. They recognized the shape of a foot, and one of them uttered the immortal words, "I declare some old Indian has been buried here." Indian burial ground. Soon they had unearthed a colossal figure, more than 10 foot from head to toe. What Emmons and Nichols did know was the stone man was the creation of Binghamton cigar maker George Hull, who was Newell's cousin, and that Hull and Newell had planted it there nearly a year before. Hundreds of people flocked to see the marvel. Newell set up a tent over it and started charging 25 cents a head. Sounds like Homer. Business was so brisk that he increased it to 50 cents 2 days later. Andrew White, first president of Cornell University, later described his visit. The roads were crowded with buggies, carriages, and even omnibuses from the city, and with lumber wagons from the farms, all laden with passengers. The giant was an impressive sight, laying in its grave, wrote White, with the subdued light from the roof of the tent falling upon it, and with the limbs contorted as if in death struggle. It produced a most weird effect. An air of great solemnity pervaded the place. Visitors hardly spoke above a whisper. White, nonetheless, recognized immediately that the giant was a hoax. It was obviously a statue, and not a very good one, and there was no reason for the 2 labourers to have been digging a well at that spot they found it in. Even so, White overheard a very excellent doctor of divinity, pastor of one of the largest churches in Syracuse, declare that is it not strange that any human being, after seeing this wonderfully preserved figure, can deny the evidence of his senses and refuse to believe what is so evidently the fact that we have here a fossilized human being, perhaps one of the giants mentioned in Scripture? Extraordinary. Therefore, it was, recalled White, that in spite of all scientific reasons to the contrary, the work was very generally accepted as a petrified human being of colossal size. It became known as the Cardiff Giant. Evidence of giants in America was nothing new. The Massachusetts Puritan Cotton Mather believed that mastodon fossils found near Albany, New York, in 1705 were those of giants who had perished in Noah's flood. The giants that once groaned under the waters, he wrote, are now under the earth, and their dead bones are lively proofs that the Mosaic history, nearly a century later, when the Connecticut farmer Pliny Moody discovered foot-long, 3-toed tracks in a sandstone ridge on his land, his pastor identified them as from Noah's raven, which had rested on the ledge and probably slept there before resuming the dangerous journey back to the ark. The same cleric later deduced that dinosaur bones found to the south were probably the remains of human giants. Meki, I read this and I hear that people were attempting to attach anything to religion, to bolster, maybe to strengthen it, and use any excuse.
You're right. Now, the thing is this, what this article does, it focuses on all the things that people had gotten wrong, but they don't talk about all the things that were found in Forbidden Archaeology by Michael Cremo. right? All these from the 19th century, all the finds that are now potentially living under the Smithsonian. They're not mentioned here at all, right? The only thing that's mentioned are things that are clearly, easily disprovable in this context, right? Dinosaur bones, yes, and all this wonderful stuff. And you're right. Back then, there was a very strong notion to attach it to biblical truth. You have to understand, this is a very different time to today, and people were much more literally faithful than they are today. I'm not saying people aren't today, but back then it was a much more common thing, right? And the Bible was taken at face value, especially in parts of the United States, where there was a very strong evangelical movement, and still is, which takes the scripture as literal, including stories of the giants. Now, as it turns out, of course, that is absolutely accurate, in my opinion, anyway, right? In a non-religious context. But yeah, it's interesting how this is written and turned out. Thomas Jefferson had his own interest in fossils, and in 1804 he even set aside a room in the White House for his collection of extinct elephant, giant ground sloth, and bison bones, teeth, and tusks. Earlier, he had convinced Yale College president Ezra Stiles that such remains were of animals rather than giants. Fascinated by an immense claw of a ground sloth, Jefferson wrote to a friend, "I cannot help believing that this animal, as well as the mammoth, are still existing." And maybe he had a point. For Josiah Priest, writing in his American Antiquities and Discoveries in the West, ancient North America had been crowded with Egyptians, Romans, lost tribes of Israel, Hindus, and others. And giants, Priest cites scripture on giants and notes. There are those who imagine that the first inhabitants of the globe, or the antediluvians, were much larger than our race at the present time. And he reports discoveries such as one in Indiana of several skulls, legs, and thigh bones, which plainly show that their possessors were persons of gigantic stature. Now, interestingly, the next bit, laughable today, American Antiquities was a bestseller when it appeared in 1835, going through 5 editions and 22,000 copies. And is it really that laughable? We know that there must have been traffic between Egypt and the Americas. We know it because we found cocaine in mummies. We know it because of the corn that we find on both sides of the Atlantic. We know it because of tobacco. So I wonder who's got the last laugh here. At mid-century, Charles Darwin's ideas of natural selection would challenge the idea that species were never changing and undermine the biblical account of Noah's flood and the belief that fossils, including those of giants, were evidence of life forms obliterated by that flood. Darwin's Origin of Species appeared in November 1859, almost exactly a decade before the discovery of the Cardiff giant. But what impact did it have on the general public? Publisher John Murray, fearing a financial fiasco, had balked at the 500-page manuscript and initially asked that Darwin cut it down and focus the work on pigeons, because everybody is interested in pigeons. Murray's fears proved unfounded, and the book went into a second edition in 1860, but it was handily outsourced by Samuel Smiles' Self-Help. George Hull is one person who might have read Darwin. In 1866, Hull was in Ackley, Iowa, looking into why his brother-in-law was late paying for a consignment of 10,000 cigars. While there, Hull, an atheist, got into heated argument with the Reverend Mr. Turk, a Methodist revivalist. Hull later recalled spending the night wondering about why people would believe those remarkable stories in the Bible about giants, when suddenly I thought about making a stone giant and passing it off as a petrified man. And this paragraph, and let me just pause here for a second. This is really at the crux of this conflict. You had a very strong, maybe atheistic is maybe too strong a term, but certainly away from the organized churches. And Darwin, with his theory of evolution, of course, was the poster child for discrediting the church and the stories it told. You have to also remember that was just shortly after that time, in the 1860s, 70s, and 80s, that Marxism saw the light of day. Karl Marx and Engel. I forget his first name now. Anyway, doesn't matter. They were industrialists or sons of industrialists, and they gave birth to what we now know as communism. Right? This was the time, the political upheaval, the invention of the industrialized machines, that gave the workers for the first time, I guess, the ability to organize, unionize, and stop production, and hurt the capitalist elite. So this is a very, very troubled time, the 19th century, especially the latter half, which of course culminated in World War One. Secrecy was critical to his plan, so Hull decided to make the Petrified Man far from New York. Back in Iowa in June 1868, he found suitable stone near Fort Dodge and hired men to quarry out an 11-foot long block of gypsum. Fearful of a leak, Hull told them that the stone was for a monument to Abraham Lincoln in New York. Shipped by train to Chicago, the block was carved by a German stonecutter who was sworn to silence. Stone cutters. I'm sorry. Who made Steve Gutenberg a star?
Who holds back the electric car?
We
do.
Oh, that's funny. The Finnish giant, weighing almost 3,000 pounds, it's 1.5 tons, went by rail to a station near Binghamton, and from there went to Cardiff in November 1868. It was duly excavated there the following October by Gideon Emmons and Henry Nichols, who were directed to the spot by Newell himself. After the discovery, Hull found out that Newell had told others about the hoax. The secret wouldn't last long, so he sold the giant to a syndicate of businessmen led by David Hannum, receiving altogether $23,000. Oh, that's a princely sum.
Money. Yeah.
You can buy half of Alaska with it. Hull's timing was impeccable. On November 5, the syndicate had the giant dug up and shipped to Syracuse, later taking it on the road, heading toward New York City. But there was trouble on the horizon in the form of P.T. Barnum. A ruthless competitor, Barnum capitalized on the Cardiff hoax in a masterful fashion, as told in his Funny Stories, 1890. One thing was certain, he says, it was a great attraction, visited by hundreds of people daily, and I thought that so great a curiosity should be exhibited under proper management in New York City. I therefore approached the proprietors and said, I will give you $50,000 for your Cardiff giant as it is. When they declined the offer, Barnum decided to make an exact copy of the giant. He sent an undercover agent to the exhibition who covertly modeled the giant's shape in a lump of wax. Industrial espionage, huh? Yeah. Creating a plaster replica based on the model and the giant's measurements taken from advertisements was easy. Barnum arranged for his copy to be shown at the museum in New York, where it was, he wrote, a considerable attraction and drew crowds of visitors while the original was lumbering along down the North Hudson River, stopping at towns on the way. Dave?
Absolutely. Commenting on those who paid to see Barnum's fake giant, Hannum remarked, "There's a sucker born every minute," if you remember that phrase.
Yep.
The syndicate sought an injunction against Barnum, but the judge told them, "Bring your giant here, and if he swears to his own, geniuses, as a bona fide petrification, you shall have the injunction you asked for." The courtroom loss was just one of several setbacks. On November 25th, Yale paleontologist Othniel C. Marsh wrote a scathing denunciation of the Cardiff giant. It is of very recent origin and a most decided humbug. I am surprised that any scientific observers should not have at once detected the unmistakable evidence against this antiquity. Then, on December 10th, Hull confessed all in the press. Hull was not, in fact, the originator of the petrification idea. There was a petrification spoof in the newspaper, Alta California, in 1858, written as a letter from a bogus German scholar, Friedrich Leichenberger, MD. It tells of an unfortunate prospector named Ernest Fluchterspiegel who drank a half pint of fluid he found inside the geode. Returning to camp, he had pains in the epigastric and left hypochondriac regions. That's very funny. He was soon dead, inflexible and stone. Dissecting the corpse with a hatchet, and the scientific Leichenberger found the heart strongly resembled a piece of red jasper. Better known as Mark Twain's parody of the discovery of petrified man published in the Territorial Enterprise in October 1862, it began with a dead pan. A petrified man was found some time ago in the mountains south of Gravely Ford. Every limb and feature of the stony mummy was perfect, not even excepting the left leg, which had evidently been a wooden one during the lifetime of the owner. I love that, it's funny. If the wooden leg wasn't enough, a tip-off, Twain described the seated petrification as thumbing his nose. Surprisingly, 8 of the 12 newspapers that picked up the story gave no indication that it was a spoof intended to make fun of or other petrification stories then current. Twain followed this with a brief update a month later. Mr. Herr Weisnick, Know Nothing, has just arrived in Virginia City. He brings with him the head and 1 foot of the petrified man, lately found in the mountains near Gravely Ford. A skillful assayer has analysed a small portion of dirt found under the nail of the great toe and pronounces the man to have been a native of the Kingdom of New Jersey. In 1870, Twain took on the Cardiff Giant in a ghost story set in a hotel room in Manhattan into which barges a large and clumsy phantom, the ghost of the Cardiff Giant. The sad sack spook wants to be reburied in Newell's farm, but is confused and is mistakenly haunting Barnum's museum. "Why, you poor blundering old fossil," exclaims the hotel guest. "You have had all your troubles for nothing. You have been haunting a plaster cast of yourself. The real Cardiff Giant is in Albany. Confound it, don't you know your own remains?" I don't know why I put that accent on it. The Cardiff Giant gave rise to at least a dozen similar hoaxes. Ticket sales and the possibility of a quick sell for a big money seem to have been the motives for most. One such was the solid Muldoon found near Beulah, Colorado in 1876. Very similar dates, Becky, amongst all of those. It was probably named for William Muldoon, the strongman and boxer. Muldoon's petrified namesake was exhibited at 50 cents a ticket, and whether or not it was claimed that P.T. Barnum offered $20,000 for the petrification, lending it to Great Showman's approbation. A disgruntled insider revealed that the perpetrator was none other than George Hull, the creator of the Cardiff Giant, assisted by William Conant, a former Barnum employee. So they've got together and made another one. That's very funny. The Muldoon was solid, made of a mixture of rock dust, clay, plaster, ground bones, blood, and meat that was kiln dried or fired for days. Yale's Othniel Marsh reprised his Cardiff role, exclaiming the hoax and consigning it to scientific oblivion. One giveaway was the fact that Muldoon had a tail, perhaps a nod by the atheist Hull to Darwin. Mickey?
Nice. You know what this reminds me of, though? Everybody's familiar with crop circles, I'm sure, right?
Yeah.
And you know, we've had a couple of people that said, yeah, we've made crop circles, and therefore all crop circles are hoaxes. It's the same kind of logic that's being employed here. But let me continue with the story. Giants also had various marketing gimmicks. In the mid-1870s, there was a mortal struggle between Tuganock's House and Cataract House, two hotels at Lake Cayuga, New York. In 1877, the Tuganock's owner hired a local foundry worker to cook up a petrified man that had been planted where laborers widening the hotel's road would find it. They did, and the giant drew crowds to Tuganock House. Or Tafanock, actually. But the hotel's newfound prosperity was only temporary. One of those who helped bury the giant spilled the beans while drunk in a bar. P.T. Barnum's agent was supposedly among those present and promptly left the town. Worse, iron filings were one of the giant's main ingredients, and on exposure to air, it began to rust. Petrified men continued to be moneymakers, but the game was wearing thin. In 1892, drawn by the silver boom, Jefferson Randolph Soapy Smith moved to Crete, Colorado. A conman, Soapy soon rolled over Creek's vice industry, pickpockets and riffraff. He played the petrified man hoax for a quick kill. His concrete giant, nicknamed McGinty, was buried and then found at nearby Willow Creek and displayed in a saloon, the Orleans Club, or Orleans Club, for an exorbitant $1 a head. There was no attempt to maintain the hoax in the face of scientific inquiry. By the time the expert arrived to examine the petrification, it had disappeared. Soapy later disappeared from Crete himself, ending up in Skagway, Alaska, where he was gunned down in 1898. But just when a subject seems exhausted, someone takes it to a higher level, winning a jaded audience and overcoming growing skepticism by making the story more incredible than ever. That is what happened in 1899 when a petrified man was found near Fort Benton in Montana. Local newspapers marveled at its neatly trimmed sideburns and mustache, and features so perfect that a person who knew the dead man alive could not fail to recognize him now. Eventually, he was identified as reported in the Bozeman Chronicle. It was General Thomas Meagher, an Irish and Civil War hero. Meagher had been named territorial acting governor for Montana, but proved to be unstable. Paranoid, he believed that there was a conspiracy against him, and he drank too much. On the night of July 1, 1867, he fell off a steamboat into the Missouri near Fort Benton and drowned. In alternative identification, liver-eating Johnson thought he recognized his old partner, Antelope Charlie, was rejected. General Meagher headed through Chicago to New York, where he was the headline story in the World's Sunday Supplement. But times were changing. Placed prominently on page 1 was a box titled, "Proved by X-ray to be a genuine petrified man." According to one Edwin S. Kellogg, MD, the bones were in place even though the brain was atrophied through petrification. Businessman Arthur Miles, Meagher's owner, said he would consult with the Smithsonian on whether this man was genuine, but somehow never did. Skepticism and the flooded market led to the devaluation of petrified men. So the collapse of the tulip market. Right? when Barnum admitted offering $50,000 for the Cardiff Giant in 1869, his supposed offer for the solid Muldoon 7 years later was only $20,000. By the 1890s, petrified men were cheap. One found at Wind Cave, South Dakota, went for $2,000. And another found near Fresno and exhibited in the popular drugstore there, sold for $1,000. Arthur Miles was told by his father in 1899 that he knew of one for sale at $1.06 bits. Petrified men had lost their financial punch. This game was over. Dave?
Yeah, relegated to a barn in Fitchburg, Massachusetts, the Cardiff Giant made an appearance at the 1901 Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, but it was a flop and attracted little attention. A Des Moines, Iowa publisher bought it, but in 1947 he sold it to the Farmers Museum in Cooperstown. where it is now displayed beneath a tent that duplicates the one under which it was exhibited at Stub Newell's farm in October 1869. Why had the petrified men succeeded at all? The beliefs in giants and search for evidence of them had a long history. Andrew White, who witnessed crowds at Cardiff, wrote, "There seemed no possibility even of suspending the judgment of the great majority who saw the statue. As a rule, they insisted on believing it a petrified giant. There was," he noted, "a joy in believing that was increased by the peculiarly American superstition that the correctness of a belief is decided by the number of people who can be induced to adopt it." That's a very good concept.
Ha! Ha!
Right?
Yep.
The flat earth making. White could have been writing of Mary L. Day Arms, who recorded her impressions of the solid Muldoon in The World as I Have Found It in 1878. Throngs of wonder-seekers were irresistibly drawn, all of whom, as if entering the presence chamber of the King of Terrors, seemed awed by this silent representative of the dead past, and with hushed voices and bated breath lingered over the lineaments of one which, if it had been known at the time was not a real petrification, would perhaps have excited only feelings of ridicule and words of derision. We were willing to be humbugged with the rest. Ken Fedder, author of Frauds, Myths and Mysteries in 2001, says, "The most obvious explanation is that Cardiff Giant confirmed biblical stories of giants. Then there were folks who probably knew better, the smart businessmen in Syracuse. They saw the people were coming in to see the giant in using hotel space and buying food. Another possibility," he says, "is that it is like reading the National Enquirer today. People didn't really believe it, but were willing to pay 50 cents to see the Cardiff Giant because they thought it was interesting." Fedder's own experience at the Farmers Museum is also enlightening, if discouraging. They have the giant in a tent with a sign outside saying "World's Greatest Hoax," along with displays inside explaining it. A couple came in and walked around the giant. As they left, the wife turned to the husband and said, "So, is that real?" And the husband shrugged and said, "I guess so." Somewhere, George Hull and P.T. Barnum must still be laughing about the Cardiff Giant, and perhaps David Hannum is thinking, "There's a sucker born every minute."
Nice. Look, I put this in here to give people, and I think it's been proven beyond a doubt that the Cardiff Giant, as well as the Solid Muldoon and others, are in fact hoaxes. But like I said earlier, and I want to expand on this just a little bit before the end of the show, crop circles are a phenomenon that's still with us. And notwithstanding the fact that the two guys in the UK said it was them who did it in the first place, right? So they did it, and here we are, and there's the explanation for all crop circles. So all crop circles ever were made by these two guys or similar people. There's a fundamental difference which most people overlook, though, in the manufactured crop circles and the crop circles which are, I guess, the genuine article. We don't know where they came from. The crucial difference here is that the genuine article, it has the crops, as it were, you know, the wheat or whatever it is, woven or interwoven with each other without breaking the stem. So the plant actually keeps growing even though it has been pushed to the ground. It is not dead. Yeah?
It's not broken.
All the crops,
and
it's
the
not
board,
broken. No.
That's right. The boards and ropes was the thing that
Yep.
they said they used. Yeah.
Correct. And whereas, you know, all the crop circles that were supposedly made by them, which are also quite intricate, and you can, of course, do that, are in fact all broken and destroyed, and the crop does no longer grow because it has been killed. the crop in a genuine, or what I like to call a genuine crop circle, is not killed. It is the same thing with this. Yes, there have been hoaxes, and there have always been hoaxes with anything, really. But it's then used as the argument that all finds of this nature that are anomalous, and we'll actually go into those maybe next week or the week after, of this nature that might well be resting in the Smithsonian or other institutions away from prying eyes, which are in fact the real deal. I mean, you can easily find out if something is a hoax. I mean, if it is like a plaster cast or it's made with like rock powder, you know it's a statue. It's not an actual petrified person. But finding a real thing, that you cannot exhibit. And those things have usually disappeared. And we know they have disappeared because we know they existed and now they're not to be found anymore.
Like the giant thigh bone, for instance, which suggested someone was 12 foot tall or whatever, right?
Well, that's correct. Yeah, and implements as well, utensils, vases, all kinds of gold chains even in coal. There's a whole bunch of stuff that was found and dismissed or hidden away now, which you can't really argue with. Nobody would argue with that the pyramids were built up. The Baalbek complex has these 1,000-ton stones because there it is. You can't argue with it. It's there, right? The question though is why and how and
more and when. Yes, all the questions.
All of that. But that's complete. No, it's been answered. It's the Romans. The Romans, Dave.
Sure,
the Romans.
It was always the Romans, wasn't it?
Which of course it was. Which brings us, I think, to the end of this show. It's going to be really interesting next week. We're going to start off with the tinfoil head zone next week. Forbidden archaeology, the giants of North America. Yeah, that's right. We're going there. We're doing it. It's going to happen. So stay with us. It's really going to be very interesting. And then we're going to talk about the Denisovan theory as well. Very interesting stuff coming up next week. There's a little bit of hard science, which I would think we probably have in the week after. And then we're going to talk about strange skulls. We're talking about there's actually a newspaper clipping as well I've got here for you. So, we're still there. We probably have another 2 shows in this. And we are today on page, we're leaving you on page
56 of 81. Oh,
there you go. Well, how about that?
And right before the music starts, because it may start right now, thank you very much for tuning in. This is Shiny Side Out. There's the music. This is episode 376. Stay tuned for a round table with Jer Bear. Be part of radio. Call in and express yourself. Take care.